Good afternoon, evening, morning, whatever time it is that you're listening. You've tuned into the Price and Presley Spook Show. I'm Terry Price.
I am Harold Presley. Welcome back again for the regular guy look at the paranormal stuff, the spooky stuff that you just can't explain. We like getting into that kind of thing. We've had several shows that we've dropped, and we're in full swing with this now, man. We got a lot going on. We want more stories, and we've got people emailing us their stories in. Man, some of these are great.
I just got one today, as a matter of fact. That's pretty cool.
Actually, we're gonna have a person on in a later show that sent us a couple of great stories, and we love them so much we're gonna have her on the show.
That's right. Yeah.
So that'll be coming up, and the spooky stuff, that kind of thing. Terry, none of this stuff bothers him at all. I just want to say that up front. None of this bothers him. I get freaked out by some of the pictures he puts up on our site. I mean, he knows my thing with rats. I don't like rats, rodents, or anything like that. Of course, he puts this picture of the most horrific looking rodents I've ever seen in my life. Really, thanks, man.
You're welcome.
That was
it was funny because I posted that picture. I wanted to get our Facebook viewership to tell us what it is that they're afraid of, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I gotta put a picture with it, and I just happened to cross that one, and I went, "Oh, Harold's gonna love this."
I never should have told you that. I mean, I won't be able, I'm gonna come in the room, our room here for a recording session, and there's gonna be like probably little fake ones all over the floor or something, and then I'll leave.
I'd never do that to you, Harold. Now my wife Tracy might.
She might. Okay, we'll blame Tracy for it. Okay, all right, that's great.
Hey, listen, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's really important that if you're listening to us on YouTube, that you go down and hit the like button, the subscribe button, so that you'll know whenever we have new episodes coming up. Right. And leave us a comment either on Facebook or in the comment section of YouTube.
Good or bad, we want comments. I don't care. We don't care.
We need your opinion. Tell us what we're doing right. Tell us what we're doing wrong.
Yeah, there's something else we need to be doing. Tell us.
Just try to be nice, because my feelings get hurt easy.
Yeah. And by the way, I did mention we want your stories. Email them to us. You can email those at pricepresleyshow@gmail.com. That's where you can email us anytime you want to.
That's right. And if your story's good enough, then we possibly could ask you to come on the show and tell it yourself.
Might do that. And Facebook, we got a page up on Facebook. Go there, like our page, facebook.com/Price Presley Spook Show. Go there and check that out.
That's right. And follow that page. And because we've got stuff going on all the time, don't we?
Yeah.
Harold?
And we mentioned all that, but you're listening to the show right now. You will see on the show here, there's a little link tree that you can open up and get all the links to.
That's right. That's right. And if you would like to help support the show, we do have a Patreon account. Yeah. And you get little perks if you become a Patreon account. I forget what they are right now. But,
and there's swag you can get too, like these great hats. I'm looking at Terry's hat right here, and he's got on his head right now as we're recording, and they're pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, you really are. I mean,
shirts, hats, coffee mugs,
got all kinds of things up there. Yeah.
Well, we've got a great show today, Harold. I mean,
one thing we haven't talked about in any of these shows yet, and we've been mentioning it, is Bigfoot.
Yes,
I know you're really into Bigfoot. You like that. You're really into it, and you're getting me more into it now. And that's one thing we haven't really explored.
We've done ghosts.
Yeah,
we've done.
That was the spookiest one. That one freaked me out. The one at the house in Virginia.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I was really freaked out by that.
We talked to the prison guard captain that had the ghostly stuff happen in the maximum security prison, and we've talked to ghost hunters.
Ghost hunters,
real ghost hunters.
Yeah, actually do this.
This is our first out and out. We know for a fact, or our interview person knows for a fact that it was actually a Bigfoot. No, we had kind of a story. Our very first story was kind of leaned that way, but we weren't sure.
We weren't sure.
The guy wasn't sure what it was.
He was something. He didn't know what.
Our guest today, he is almost, I think he said probably about 95% sure that it was what people term as a Bigfoot. And I don't want to get into it, but I think we ought to just introduce him.
Let's get into it. We got a guy here that's going to tell us all about his encounters with Bigfoot and how that came about and everything. Jim, welcome to the show.
And how are y'all doing?
We're fantastic, man. We're great now that you're with us.
I'm so anxious to hear your story. I'm ready.
Great. I love this kind of stuff. I remember watching, what was it, the
Legend of Boggy Creek.
I watched it at the drive-in.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life. We're at the drive-in, and I'm going. We got to go home after this. Yeah. But that kind of scared me a little. But this Jim has had actual encounters. Jim, we're glad you came to the show and are joining us and going to share the stuff with us. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Tell us a little bit. I know you don't want to get into too much depth of who you are and what you do and everything, but set it up for us. Tell us where you, kind of where you're from, and set up the areas that these things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, early on lived in the DFW area as a child. Grandparents lived down in Leon County, so we were down there quite a bit. Loved the country and live in the country now. This has always been my goal, to be in the woods. Consider myself a woodsman, sportsman. That's my background in a nutshell. To get into the stories, it was in Wood County, probably.
You're saying Wood County, Texas?
Yeah, Wood County,
okay.
Texas.
Where part of the Texas is that?
Kind of central, east central.
It's actually East Texas. It is north and just east of Mineola.
Okay, now I know where Mineola is.
Right.
Yeah, I know where that is. Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
And I had a family member that had 100 acres back there, and it backed right up to International Paper property. In fact, he bought that little section from International Paper. It had been logged just for the pine. The hardwood was left, and they called it the country.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, they lived in Mesquite. We lived North Dallas, and they would go down every weekend to the country. And so it was always fun to go down there with my aunt and uncle and cousins. And so, we had been down there, made several trips prior to this incident, but it was the fall of 1980. Mm. It wasn't cold. It wasn't wintertime, but it was cool enough to have a campfire.
How old are you at this time?
I'm 13.
Oh, so you're a kid. You're a teenager.
Yeah. Yep. And I had had two cousins. They were close in age, but just a little younger than I. And we decided we were going to camp.
So we're talking about, let me, just for a second, is this the piney woods we're talking about here?
Oh, yes.
Well, yeah, that's what I thought, because it's very wooded, and it's dark in those woods.
Oh yeah, we're in the piney woods of East Texas.
Yes.
And you actually traveled through two different properties to get to his property. He had an easement through these, and he was in the back of the back. And like
he was out there then.
He was, yeah.
I'm going to say that his driveway to get from the main road down the dirt road to his property, that dirt road was probably close to a mile long. And he had a single wide trailer down there. And, they lived and worked in Mesquite, but they would go down there to get away. And so there's several people there. There's aunts and uncles, and it's just a big time.
So it's kind of like a family gathering.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Almost like a miniature family reunion. And we're down there. We're going to spend the weekend. And I had a 2-man pup tent, one of those orange.
I remember
pup tents. Yeah. And so we got about 150, 200 yards away from the house, pitched that tent, made us a little camp, dug a fire pit, and built a fire.
And this is back up in the woods, right?
And we're back up in the woods.
Okay.
Of course, my uncle came up there and he inspected and said, okay, y'all can have a fire. He didn't want to set the woods on fire.
Right.
And so we had made trips back and forth between camp and the trailer. It got late. It was completely dark, ran out of steam, and decided, well, we're gonna pack it in. Well, it got cold that night. And so I don't know how this happened, but I was actually on the side of the tent farthest away from the fire.
You drew the short straw.
I drew the short straw.
So you were really cold.
So I was cold, and we all had some sort of weapon. I think one of us had a little 410 shotgun, and one of us had a 22, and I actually had a 30-30. And we kept them in the tent with us, thinking that, something comes up in the camp, we're going to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
You're thinking like a bobcat or
bobcat
or something like that. Yeah.
Something that will come up.
So let me ask you real quick before you go on, Jim. At this point in your life, did you know anything about Bigfoot? Had you ever heard about Bigfoot?
Yes, I had seen the Patterson film and was rather intrigued with it because it looked real.
Yes, it does.
Let me ask you a quick question. You referenced this a couple of times. I'm gonna be the person out there listening that doesn't know what the Patterson film is. What are you talking about when you say Patterson film?
I'm talking about the Gimlin Patterson film from 1967, Bluff Creek.
The shaky 8 millimeter.
I think I've seen
footage.
Yes, it's real shaky.
And
it's short. I remember seeing. I know what you're talking about now. Okay.
It's actually a female Bigfoot. They call her Patty.
Very obviously female.
It's obviously because I think it had like breasts. You know.
Yeah.
It had pendulous breasts, and I was probably 9-10 years old when I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not so sure that my parents didn't shelter me from it. You know, maybe they knew about it and didn't want me to be scared with it or whatever.
Right.
But I ended up seeing it, and back in the mid 70s, you know, there was a frenzy of sightings and people were talking about it.
Yeah.
And I saw the film. So knew about something out there.
Right.
Had no idea what it was or what it could be.
This night, was Bigfoot on your mind at all, or were you just
Not
thinking
really.
about bobcats and coyotes? And
No, we weren't. We were never afraid of being in those woods.
Okay.
You know, we would traipse all around the place, and it probably made my uncle mad because we were probably moving his deer around.
Yeah.
You know, leaving scent trails everywhere, but you know, it never. We were never scared. Yeah. And even when it got dark, we were still making the trip back and forth between camp, and we were running around the edge of camp.
I see.
You know, it's not like we were walking out 200 or 300 yards from camp into the darkness, but we weren't afraid. And
so there was a lot of activity. You could say there's a lot of activity going on around the camp.
Oh yeah, I mean the party was in full swing down there. You know, the music was blaring.
I see.
The lights were on, but it did end up dying down. And by the time that we got settled down, everything down the hill had settled down, and everything was getting quiet. So it's time for us to go to sleep.
Okay, so you're in you're all in. There's three of you, and you're all in the tent, but you're the furthest away from the fire.
From the fire, you're cold. So let's pick up from there. What's happening?
And I've got one of my cousins. I can tell you his name. His name is Jerry, and then my other cousin Darren. He was closest to the fire, so he was on the outside edge. I was on the outside edge, but his edge was close to the fire.
Close to the fire.
Okay.
Little Jerry was lucky, you know, right in the middle, and we're bedded down with sleeping bags and blankets, and it was probably an hour after we had zipped the tent shut and called it an evening, and the fire was still going. It was throwing a glow onto the tent, and I could hear something. Little Jerry was dead asleep. I figured that Darren was too, but I could hear something moving around what I would consider the edge of the darkness. You know, we had the glow from the fire, and it just felt like it was just out beyond the glow of that fire. And I figured that it was an armadillo or maybe a skunk, because it just wasn't making a lot of noise. But it sounded like it was moving closer. As it got closer, it got louder. I was listening to it getting louder, and I could hear something breathing.
Okay. Now, breathing, you say?
Yes.
What type of breathing? Are we just slow and steady?
It was not, and this is hard to describe. It was not animalistic. Like it was not sniffing the ground. It was breathing like a person would breathe. It didn't sound like a cow or a horse. It didn't sound like anything that I had ever heard, other than it sounded like a person breathing. But it was just amplified.
Does that sound familiar to you, Harold? Heavy breathing.
Well, yeah, I've heard other people in some other shows say the same thing.
Our very first show,
talk about heavy breathing, like that,
and it wasn't a pant.
But his was like an old man. That's what he said, like an old man breathing.
Yeah. Well,
this just sounded large.
Yeah,
and that's exactly what he said. It does, because our very first guest, that's one of the ways he described it, was that it sounded big, it sounded large.
But it had to be pretty. It had to be close enough. It had to be pretty close in order for you to hear it breathing. So that's what I'm thinking. It had to be right outside the tent. You know what I mean, right there.
Well, at first it was just movement that I could hear.
Yeah.
And then as it progressed, it just sounded closer and closer, and it got close enough to where I could hear it breathing. And I'm wide awake. I mean, the blood is coursing through my veins. I know that there's something in camp. I'm trying to convince myself, is it one of my uncles playing a gag on me?
Yeah.
Are they going to come up there and, shake the side of the tent and yell and then run off laughing? And then it walked between the tent and the fire. And as it walked, I could feel impact tremors, not shaking me in my, in my sleeping bag, but I could feel its step.
You could feel every step it was making.
Wow.
And when it walked, it took a step, and I can only assume that it was its left leg stepped down right next to the tent. And of course, fire's on the other side. It put its leg in silhouette on the side of the tent. I could see definition. It tapered down to an ankle, and then it turned into a calf, and it just looked huge in silhouette. And then I could see I could tell that it was hairy, and then I could see long strands of hair, like it had an underlying coat of hair, and then longer hair streaming from that. And it probably hung off of the solid portion of the outline of its leg, which could have been muscle and skin, or it could have been a layer of hair, but 2 or 3 inches of long hair in every direction.
Wow.
So you could see that much definition, and
Oh yeah.
Because I guess the fire's
between the tent and
the fire, and you can see it.
Yeah.
So let me ask you: are you just laying there looking at it? You're not moving at all? I mean, are you
not moving it? At first I was tempted to get out and try to figure out what it was.
Uh-huh.
Well, did it occur to you to wake up your cousins?
No, I was at that point. I have to freely admit that I was terrified.
Okay, that's what I'm getting at.
That sounds familiar too.
Yeah.
I was actually, you talk about being frozen in fear.
Yeah.
I was indeed frozen with fear. I had no idea what I needed to do, what I should do, other than be still and be quiet.
Even though you got a 30-30 sitting right there.
and that was exactly my thought.
Well, Jim, I tell you, this really lends a lot of credence to your story, because again, our very first story
sounds very familiar.
Sounds almost exact. He had a cell phone in his hand,
and he's a
videographer for a living.
Oh wow!
And it never occurred to him to try to take a picture of what it was,
or record it, or anything like that.
So that lends a lot of credence to your story.
Wow.
So what did you finally end up doing?
It passed through camp, and it was completely silent after that. It walked through. All of the small noises that it was making.
Yeah.
It almost sounded like it was rummaging around in the leaves. Maybe picking stuff up.
Right.
As it got closer, I could hear it breathing. Then it passed through camp, and after that, absolutely no noise. It's not like it walked through camp and got on the other side and started looking around or doing whatever it was that it had been doing on the other side of camp. it was just gone. And I laid there and listened. I was actually more fearful at that point because now I felt exposed. I was close to the dark side of
the woods,
to the woods.
Right.
And you don't know, and you didn't know where it was. So you said, "Well, I don't know where it is."
Didn't know where it went. Don't know if it was going to circle back. Maybe it was just sizing up the tent and figuring, okay, I'm fixing to do whatever I'm going to do to this tent, and laid there and finally fell asleep.
Well, that's pretty common too. When you're so scared and you're tensed up and you stay in that state for such a long time, your body has a tendency to wear itself out.
Yeah, because the adrenaline's pumping, and you're just like, and you're worn out,
and then you crash.
And you crash, and it's like your body says, "Okay, you're going out," right? So did anybody? First of all, did anybody else see this in camp?
Well, I'm going to get to that part.
Okay.
Momentarily.
Okay.
So the next morning, we woke up. None of us said a word. Okay. Little Jerry was dead to the world. He never knew anything. So I knew that he didn't hear anything. But I didn't say anything to Darren. And I certainly didn't say anything to my uncles. We were afraid I was afraid that if I said anything, they might say, yeah, y'all telling them stories, so y'all need to stay down here from now on. They weren't going to let us go out traipsing around in the woods or whatever. So didn't say anything. Just the day picked up like normal, and that was probably a Saturday night, and we got up Sunday and cleaned everything up, and everybody packed up and went to their respective homes, and the weekend was over.
Okay.
So that was in 1980. And it was probably 96 or 97. Of course, we're full-grown adults at this point. We had bought a house in East Texas. And my cousin Darren, he would sometimes come down, spend the weekend with us. He and I were like brothers. And sitting out on the porch, I asked him, I said, do you happen to remember when we were camping in the country? And he capped the line and he said, and that thing walked through camp? I was like, you were awake? And he said, I heard every noise that thing made. And he said, and he mentioned, he didn't call it an impact tremor. He said, I felt it when it stepped down, because it stepped down probably right in line with his stomach.
Oh, wow.
It was almost the middle of the tent. Yeah. But he said that he felt the ground move when it stepped right there next to him.
Wow.
And I said, so you heard everything that I heard and saw. He said, I was awake for every bit of it. And he was in the same state that I was completely petrified, was interested in not moving and not making any noise.
So he saw the silhouette, I guess.
He saw the silhouette.
And everything that you saw.
He saw what I saw.
Because he was close to the fire. He was, wasn't he?
Yes.
He was the one closest to the fire.
It stepped down right next to him.
And you guys never spoke about it until you were adults.
It was a solid 16 years.
16 years, yeah.
Wow.
And of course, we had spent time together. I was at his wedding. He was at my wedding. It was, family reunions and other people's weddings and all sorts of get-togethers, and never once mentioned it.
Well, this thing must have had a profound effect on the both of you if you never mentioned it to anybody.
Yeah, really.
At that point, nobody in my family knew about it other than him.
Wow.
And I thought that I was the only one that knew about it. And then when I found out that he knew about it, we decided that we could tell that story. And little Jerry is completely disappointed because
he missed it.
He missed
it. He slept through it.
Well, Jim, I have to ask. I mean, did this stay with you throughout all those years, those 15 years before, and thinking that you're the only one that saw it? Did it affect you in what you thought about being in the woods and so on and so forth?
No, ironically enough, it didn't scare me off the woods. I was a little more aware of my surroundings. I started paying a little closer attention.
I bet.
And it's not like I was trying to become a professional tracker or anything of that nature. It's just I started looking, instead of just right in my immediate area, I would look further down.
Right.
Yeah.
To see if, see what was going on, see what was going on at a distance.
Yeah, kind of like a motorcycle rider does after he's been in an accident. You always look about 10 more seconds ahead.
It didn't scare me.
Well, it would have scared the bejesus out of me, I tell you.
So let me ask you, so you all these years go by and everything, did you ever doubt what you saw? Maybe try to rationalize and say,
oh yeah, I wondered.
Yeah.
And when Darren and I spoke about it, I asked him straight up, I'm like, are you sure that wasn't one of our uncles? And he said, I thought the same thing. He said, but the size and the breathing, I'm sure that a man could mimic that breathing, but it would make you tired to have to move that much air,
right?
Yeah, and make that much noise. I don't think you could do it ground locked. This thing, it just sounded like that's the way it breathed, effortlessly. And then when it walked and it stepped and it gave a little impact tremor, we were convinced that it was not one of our uncles trying to scare us.
And I'm thinking, if it had been one of your uncles, they would want you to know
that
they did that to you.
And we mentioned that.
Yeah, they would have fessed up.
That. Where was the payoff?
Yeah, right. There's no payoff.
They come up there and they make noise, and then they walk through.
Yeah.
And they just go back down to the house, and maybe they thought that we would mention something the next day.
Yeah.
Maybe they thought, okay, that'll be the payoff, that'll be the gag. I would think that if they went through that much effort, then they would probably shake the tent.
Right.
Or even the next day they would ask you, hey, did anything?
Yeah, that's right.
Anything strange happen last night? Or they would egg you on.
My dad did that enough to me as a kid.
Comments.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So no comments.
There was no indication.
We know it wasn't there.
At that point in time, I was really the only one that was looking for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unbeknownst to me, Darren was looking for it. He didn't get it.
Yeah.
And so we're like, okay, that was something. Don't know what it was.
Don't know what it was.
But that was something. Figure that it was some sort of Bigfoot-esque type animal. It certainly wasn't a deer or bobcat or anything else that roams the woods of East Texas.
So this was something that was walking on 2 feet that you saw, not down on all fours or anything.
And we also know that there's really no bear down in that area, I don't think. Is there?
Yeah.
Well, bear have been reintroduced into East Texas here of late, but at that point in time, no.
Not then. Yeah.
Wow.
It just didn't have that. Its leg didn't look like it. Looked like a man's leg. It was just extremely large
and hairy. Yeah.
So either it was a Bigfoot or it was an Italian.
And it was just what we what we could see.
Terry Price.
I'm Italian, so I can say that.
We could see the leg, and then we both saw a fleeting shadow, which would have been its other leg, but of course it's too far away from the tent. We just saw it pass through. So it, as it was taking a step, picking the other foot up, it just like went through frame, left a moving shadow.
I see.
Wow.
And then picked back up.
Well, I was just going to say, you were talking about where's the payoff and everything, but my dad scared me a lot after we saw Legend of Boggy Creek because it affected me greatly. And he would do things like run outside and scratch on the window and growl a little bit and then run back in before I could get to the living room,
Well, that's just good, clean fun.
That's right. But that's somebody who's trying to scare you. That's what they do.
They want you to know that they did that.
And there's always the payoff. They're laughing and having a good time with it at your expense. So it doesn't appear to me like anybody in your family was really out to fool you guys.
I would think that after this much time, that one of those uncles if they did it, or were they all of them were in cahoots, because I think
Right.
there were 3-4 uncles present at the time. They would have said something to me or Darren
for sure.
before he passed away.
Yeah.
And they never have.
Let's move on to the second story.
Yeah, let's go to story number 2.
So that was the fall of 80.
Mm-hmm.
The summer of 82 was over in Leon County. I went down every summer. The day that school let out, I went down to my grandparents' house, and
so
I stayed.
You're 15, 16.
I'm 15. I'm 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I would go down there and work.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with Granddaddy. He worked on a ranch, running heavy equipment.
Now, this is not the same place. This is in Leon County.
This is in Leon County.
Okay.
Granddaddy has 15 acres. That's where his homestead is at. Across the road and back towards town, about a mile, and then probably about a mile off the road, is what we call the old place. 200 acres of family land. And I'd go over there and mow. You know, Granddaddy had his little section that he was going to inherit, or did inherit, and I would mow part of his. He had a tank there, and after working all day at the ranch, I'd hop on the tractor, go over there and do whatever it is needed to be done. And my dad actually hunted down there. He had a deer stand, and we would go down there and camp.
Now, when you say tank, you mean a pond, right?
Yeah, a little pond.
Okay.
And so by this time, we have graduated to an army canvas tent. Very, very nice.
Yes.
Everybody, there's 4 or 5 people could sleep in that comfortably.
That's
Mm-hmm.
right.
And so me and 2 of my friends, one of them was an older brother of the guy that was the same age as I was. We all decided, hey, we're going to go camp at the old place. So I actually went over there and pitched the tent, made camp during the day, out of convenience, just because who wants to pitch a tent in the dark?
Nobody, if they're smart.
And Granddaddy had some tick medicine that I would spread out all around, so you just wouldn't get completely covered in ticks. And I went over there and spread all that out, and pitched the tent, dug the fire pit, gathered up some old wood. It's the dead of summer. Don't know why we thought we needed a fire, but it's not really camping unless you have a campfire.
That's right.
And so when I got all that done from a wash, it's not a creek. It's merely a wash. Whenever we get heavy rain, water comes down through there and makes its way back to that pond. And so I got in it, and I wanted to walk from there to the pond. Well, I'm walking, and it's snaking around there, and the walls are probably 7 or 8 foot tall. This is kind of a gully.
Yeah.
And making my way through it, rounded a little curve, found a dead coyote. And it was a fresh kill, and it had been raked down from its front shoulder all the way down its rib cage into its soft portion of its belly. Something had laid it open and killed it. And so I looked at it. It kind of startled me, and I thought, man, I am going to use that. I'm going to scare them too with that tonight. So I kind of,
you're going to get some payoff.
I kind of made a mental note of where it was located. I'm like, okay, so I've got it all mapped out. So walked on down to the pond, messed around, walked back up to camp. Okay, well, one of them had to work that evening. So one of them came on out, and we were there. Well, the other one, getting off work late, he didn't know exactly where the road was at. So I knew what time, I knew how long it would take me to get back up to the highway, knew what time he got off work. So I timed it. I said, I'll be standing up there. You slow down when you get to this certain point, and I'll start flashing the light, and you'll know it's me. So that's what I did. Walked all the way. It was over a mile from where camp was back to the main road. Never turned the flashlight on. Just walked the moonlight trail.
Because you knew it so well.
because I knew it so well.
And it was lit with the moonlight.
Right.
And it was pretty bright. So got up there, got him gathered up, came back down, went back to camp. So we're going to go out walking around. So this is probably 10:30 at night. So we're going to walk around. So I've got it all mapped out. I'm fixing to take them down into that gully, and I'm going to walk down towards the pond. I'm going to scare them with this.
The dead coyote.
The dead coyote.
Okay.
Couldn't find it.
Uh-huh.
And I was actually starting to hunt it. And one of them asked me, says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I might as well tell you. Found this coyote this afternoon, and I was going to scare y'all with it." I said, "But now I can't find it." Well, then they were like, "Oh, we got to find it." So we're scrambling, and we're walking up and down and in and out of that gully, and I took them back to the spot where I thought it was and found some hair, and it was right here. And so we were making a mad effort to find this thing. Never could find it. So, all right, whatever.
Well, that's not too highly unusual in the woods.
Something dragged it off.
No.
Something came along, dragged it off.
Not at all. And so the point that I'm making is we were not being quiet.
Oh.
We were not. We were not being stealthy. We all had fairly good, powerful flashlights. Of course, we're all packing some armament. I've got the same 30-30. I think one of those guys had a 30-30 and the other one had a shotgun. I actually had a 22 pistol. And we're not being quiet. So couldn't find the coyote. Gave up on it. So we're just walking around looking. And we get to the back side of the place. There's a fence.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, our property, the family property, is heavily wooded. Hadn't been cleared. There was one section that was considered pasture, had 2 or 3 trees in it that you could actually get in there and mow. But the guy that lived south of us, he had a hay meadow, and it was huge. I don't know how many hundreds of acres this hay meadow was. And we got up to the fence, and we're just sweeping through that field. If Game Warden had seen us, probably been in trouble, because it looked like we were spotlighting for deer.
I see.
We're all carrying, 2 of us had deer rifles. We've all got flashlights in the middle of the night, and we're looking. Well, off to our right, there was several rolls of hay, several rows of rolls of hay. And we're all trying to keep our flashlight beams concentrated so we can get as much light in one spot as we could. And so I swing over, they follow me, and I go up the first row and moved my light just a little and realized, I can't, that's just a roll of hay. There's nothing there. And was about to give up, was sweeping back down that row.
And when you say sweeping, you're talking about with your flashlight.
With a flashlight.
Okay.
And to give you some orientation, if you were to mark a line straight out from the fence to where we were at, it was probably about 30 or 40 yards. And then you take that line and go 90 degrees to your right, and it was probably another 20 or 30 yards to where the road they were at. Of course, we're looking at it at a diagonal.
Okay, right.
And when we were sweeping back up those rows of hay, something stood up from behind one of the rolls.
Now, these rolls, you're talking about the big round.
Talking about a big
rolls
round
of hay.
bale.
Yeah.
And those things are about
huge.
6 foot or so, aren't they?
You can make them 5 or 6 foot tall. Depends on the size roll that you want. These were probably 6 footers.
When it stood up, what did you see of it? Was it just the top of its head, or
you could see from about the middle of its rib cage.
Are you kidding me?
Which I think made the thing about 7
about 7 foot tall.
and a half foot tall.
Yeah, at least. Yeah.
So we all 3 saw it, and we locked on it. We quit moving, and we had the light on it.
Like I'm saying, you had your flashlights on it.
Had the flashlights on it. It started. It stood there for just a second, looking at us, and it was kind of moving around, like maybe it was trying to get its eyes out of the beams of light.
Yeah. Okay.
And it took off running, and it ran out, and when it cleared the last roll of hay and was completely out in the open, it looked like a very, very large man running. And it ran straight in that hayfield and it got directly in front of us and slowed down.
When you say directly in front of you, how close are we talking here?
This thing was probably 40 yards away from us.
Okay.
And it turned.
It faced you?
Nope. It ran away from us.
Away from you. Okay.
So you saw its back.
So it's back.
I could see its back, and I could see the whites of its feet.
Oh.
Now, when I say the whites of its feet, I could see where this animal or individual was dark, and its feet were skin colored.
Okay, I got you.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
Depending on whose skin you're talking about.
Well, just kind of, it's going to be lighter than you know.
Right.
The bottom of its feet were lighter than its hair.
I see.
So it was hairy, is what you're saying.
You could tell that it was hairy. It actually had a little glisten to it.
Now, they didn't make any sound during all this?
Not a single sound.
Other than moving around, running.
And it turned and it ran away. And we held our lights on it until we couldn't see it anymore. And it was running towards a bridge that the train uses to go over Buffalo Creek. And it was running towards that bridge. The light would only go so far. Right. It ran straight until we couldn't see it. And when we couldn't see it, we all looked at each other. We took the lights off of where it was. And we were shining them at each other. And we were all just white as ghosts.
I don't doubt it.
So you're all just pretty much. You weren't petrified.
We were dumbfounded.
But you were like, "What in the hell is this?"
And we all asked, "Did you see that? Did
you see what I just saw?" Wow.
But my first thought was that a game warden, was laying on top of one of the rolls of hay.
And that's what you saw.
And that's what you saw.
On his back.
Yeah.
And when we hit him with that light, he raised up at his waist and turned and looked at us. That was the first thought that went through my mind.
Oh, okay. So you caught him napping.
So, we caught him hunting us. We figured, we've made
enough
noise.
You thought he was hunting you. Oh, okay.
We thought, he's gonna let us make a mistake.
And he's watching.
And then get, we'd be in trouble.
Okay.
Right.
So that's when we asked each other, man, did you see that? What'd you see? Well, we started describing it. We realized, we're standing here. We don't know where that thing's at.
So you're standing in the open. You might want to get the hell out of there.
No.
So here we go.
Jim, let me stop you.
Yeah.
You said you thought it was the game warden
initially.
When it first rose up.
Mm-hmm.
I guess when it took off running, you realized that it was not on top of a hay bale.
Immediately that thought was fleeting, and it was dismissed when it started to move. Because when it started to move, it was moving with purpose. That thing was extremely fast.
Faster than a human?
I don't think a man could run that fast.
Wow.
And I know that his legs aren't that long. He couldn't take strides that long. So we hauled Heine back to the camp.
I bet you did.
So
didn't even take time to snuff the fire. We left.
Okay, let me ask you before you go further. When you guys were out there, did you have your weapons with you?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make that clear. You were armed when you saw this thing.
We were armed, and of course I'm jumping ahead and then coming back. But when we got back in town, we did not go to my grandparents' house. A mile away, 2 miles away. We didn't go there
because you didn't think of it,
their grandparents' house.
Oh, I see.
What?
Well, you didn't go to your grandparents' house because you just didn't think of it, or?
No. I had kind of a standing rule with my grandparents that they didn't mind me staying out late, camping, being with these two guys, as long as when they brought me home, I didn't make any noise coming in, didn't want to wake Granddaddy. Because once Granddaddy woke up, didn't matter what time he woke up, couldn't go back to sleep.
I see.
So he tried to sleep till 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
If I came in at 2 o'clock making noise, well, then he'd be up at 2.
Yeah.
And you were in trouble.
You messed up his routine.
I just out of courtesy didn't do that. So we went back to town and slept at his house. These two guys, they were brothers.
What did you guys discuss?
Here's what's ironic. So we got to camp, jumped in the oldest one's car. We all three got in, and the car wouldn't crank.
Oh, sounds like an old horror movie to me.
It was, looking back, it couldn't have got any more classic. You had to get out and bump the battery connection.
Right.
They would not even get out and cover me.
Oh no! Go ahead, Jim. You do it.
We sat there for what seemed like 5 minutes. It was probably closer to 1 minute, discussing what, try it again. It wouldn't crank. So it's like, well, somebody's going to have to get out and, bump that connection. They wouldn't do it. I got out, completely scared out of my mind. I don't know why. I mean, I was young, would never do this now, but I got out and cocked that .22 pistol. It was a single action revolver, and I rolled the hammer back, and then I tried to open the hood.
Well, as big as this thing was, you realized that if you just shot it with that, you'd have just made it mad.
You'd have made it mad, probably.
Oh yeah. I mean, it wouldn't have done any good.
Yeah.
And I actually, in the process of opening that hood, squeezed that trigger, and I don't have a clue how I didn't shoot myself in the leg, but I didn't.
Wow.
Did it go off? It went off?
Oh, yeah, it went off. I squeezed the trigger and dropped the hammer and shot a round off right in the ground,
like something out of a movie.
Right next to my foot.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
Well, I know how easy that can happen. It happened to me once, so yeah.
I'm monkeying with the battery. It cranked up, closed the hood, and got out of there. Went to his house. We didn't go inside. We sat outside and we discussed everything that we had seen. We all had the same exact story. We all saw the same thing. We decided that we weren't going to tell a soul because grandparents probably would think we were crazy. They wouldn't let us go back out there and camp. So we just didn't tell anybody. Wow. I haven't seen those gentlemen. I saw one of them. One of them graduated, moved off, started his life. The other one was a year behind, and it's been decades since I've talked to him. While we were still communicating, when it was just either two or the three of us, we would recount the story. And it was always, what do you think? What do you think that was? What did we see? And I can't remember. I know one of them. I don't remember which one, if it was the older or the younger one, had the same exact thought that I did about it being a game warden.
Yeah.
On top of one of the rolls of hay.
Really? Until it started running.
Yeah. Until it started to move. Wow. So that actually encapsulates and wraps up that story. I went back the next day in the middle of the day, took the tent down and broke camp, and actually have never camped since. No, I never camped there since.
Well, while you were tearing everything down, were you afraid? Were you watching the woods? Yeah.
I mean, I was definitely, I would work and look.
Yeah.
And then I'd go back to work and I'd look again, until and I hastily rolled the tent up, actually had to fold it back up properly once I got it back to my grandparents' house.
Right.
But just wasn't interested in being there for very long. And they said they weren't going to come back out. So I was on my own.
Well, Jim, I hate to stop you right here, but we've gone longer than we normally do.
Sure.
But this is such a compelling story. I wanted to make sure we got it all.
Absolutely.
Would you be okay with coming back and doing a part two of this?
Two, yeah.
Because I know you got more story.
Certainly.
Well, it has certainly been a great story so far, and I've truly enjoyed it. And there's been a lot of similarities with the earlier story that we did, our very first podcast. So that lends a lot of credence to what you're saying.
Yeah,
sure.
A lot. The main thing being that you were frozen. Like, you weren't thinking rationally. You're just like, I just froze there, and I'm just looking at what's going on, and I'm not thinking.
It is so startling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the breathing.
You don't expect to see something like that.
You don't. Yeah.
You don't expect it, and when you do, it's like, whoa.
What the hell is this?
Well, Jim, we're going to have you come back and tell us some more about this. So definitely, plan that a part 2 of this.
That's right. And if you listeners haven't listened to our episode "Eyes in the Dark," I suggest you go back and listen to that episode. You'll hear a lot of similarities to what Jim has told us. And don't forget, please go down and hit the subscribe button on YouTube so that you'll be notified whenever the next episodes drop. And
you'll see a link tree right here while you're listening to the podcast, and that'll take you to different places. One place would be the YouTube page, as you said, Price Presley Spook Show. That's right. All you got to do is type that in. And also you can get us on Facebook.com/Price Presley Spook Show.
That's right.
And email us.
And email us, because that's how we found Jim.
Email your stories. That's exactly.
If you've got something that you've been through, whether it's ghost, UFO, Bigfoot, it doesn't matter. Anything kind of paranormal or spooky, we want to hear from you. So send us your story, and if it's a good enough story, then
you may become Jim.
That's
we'll have you on the show.
That's right. and we will keep you anonymous if you want to be kept anonymous. Yes, we don't have to tell your real name. And do that. Contact us, and don't forget to leave a comment in the comment section. Just tell us what you think of Jim's story. I would be curious to see what you folks really think about this story so far. Comment on Facebook. Be sure that you give us a like and follow us on Facebook. And we're on Instagram also, and I think Twitter. I've lost count of all the things that we've got going on. But
like I said, the link tree will have all that stuff in there. So,
and we want to hear from you. This is the average, as Harold always says. It's the average guy take on the paranormal, and we try to keep the jargon down. We don't try to be too judgmental of any of the stories. We want to know what you think. So it's important to us that you guys give us a comment and let us know what you think about these stories. Now, we're going to have Jim back for part 2. Until then, be sure you listen to all of our previous episodes. There's some good ones. You're going to love them, and we've got some good ones coming
up. That's going to do it for this edition.
That's right. I'm Terry Price.
I am Harold Presley.
Don't get spooked.